Welcome back to the Tea with Nicky. I'm joined today with Anika Ojala. But before I start bragging and fangirling over here, I'm going to just allow her to introduce herself.
Hi, Nicky. Thanks so much for inviting me to come through today here in beautiful Cape Town. My name is Anika. My pronouns are she and her. I'm an executive coach, but also a technology and equality advisor, which I think we'll dive into a little bit. My journey's taken me to quite cool places around the world. And today I'm here with you, and I can't wait to see where this conversation is going to take us.
I'm super excited. As I said, fangirl, just seeing someone who's out there fighting the good fight in Parliament. But before we digress, let's start with the podcast and some of the questions that I have for you. So we're just going to start off with the ABCs of your career to just kick it off, to get a bit more of an intro for you for those that don't know. So starting with A, what was your aha moment in your career that you knew this is what I'm supposed to do?
I was always really interested in human rights, and from a climate crisis point of view as well. Growing up as a teenager, I feel like we all have this little activist in us. And mine was really passionate about making a difference in the world, because I realized quite early on that I was very privileged. Growing up in Northern Europe, where as a white girl person, I was able to have a lot of opportunities to travel and see the world, and that kind of compiled around high school time. And I decided I want to make a difference somehow in the world. And I went to study political science and worked in really grassroots human rights movements. And from that point, I realized that there is only so much we can do from within those grassroots spaces, and we need strong advocates also inside systems. And my path led me to also have that opportunity to make a difference inside political systems, because I would see in safe houses for women who are survivors of human trafficking and gender-based violence that day after day we had to say, we don't have any empty beds anymore. We don't have room or capacity to take in these women who are fleeing violence in their homes. And the realization is like, why the hell do we not have space for these women comes from a political decision, that there's no funding, there's not enough beds, there's not enough safe houses in general, and there's not enough preventative measures taken by the government to end these forms of violence. So those moments were definitely, say, aha moments. We have many of them, but I think starting from childhood, then having this decision to pursue this career path in high school, and then doing the grassroots hands-on work, and then realizing, fuck, can I swear?
Yes.
Okay. We also need to be inside those systems, as wild as it sounds to think that we could actually do that and fight against these huge problems that we have, and the people who are holding on to the power and who are refusing to take action to counter human rights violations, that we got to do it.
Yeah. Oh, well, you're preaching to the choir here. As someone living in South Africa, we know that South Africa is one of the worst cases of gender-based violence as a country. And I mean, last year around the G20, it was declared a national disaster or state of emergency. But I feel, I mean, maybe you might have some more insight and we can delve into this a little bit later, but I feel that not much has been done since the state of emergency was declared. So we really, but then you've got Women for Change who are really doing incredible things and really driving quite a lot. And then Rape Crisis Cape Town as well. I don't know many of the other organizations across the country, but those I do know here, and they make such an impact. But we'll get into those later. So carrying on with the ABC. So B, what would you say was your biggest failure that you've had in your career, but that it quietly shaped everything in it?
That's such a good question, but it's also such a hard question to answer, because I like to think of myself as a fixer and a person who moves on. I'm sure we could relate on that. It's like, oh, this didn't work out. Let me fix it. Let me move on. Let me figure out the next move. And I don't like to see things as failures. But obviously there has been some, and I think some of mine happened around the time when I started expanding my work to also work on AI and digital, because it was such a natural path for me. I'm like, if I'm a gender equality, LGBTIQ sexual health advocate, and I have this opportunity to make this difference at high level international arenas, I can't ignore the part of the world that is also evolving, which is our lives, which is tech, digital, specifically AI. So I'm like, okay, I want to go more into this, and I want to start learning. And I don't have a degree in any kind of tech sector. I don't have a digital policy degree. So I just started learning. And I can tell you, I said a lot of stupid things in like very high level meetings because I actually had a small understanding of the things that I was working on and that I wanted to build my expertise on. But in those moments, I definitely feel like people gave me a lot of grace and a lot of compassion while I was learning. And that was definitely some fuck ups that I did that I hope everybody makes along the way. Because if you're teaching yourself something, you want to learn something, it's inevitable that you're going to go.
No, 100%.
And make a bit of a fool of yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And the reason why I also I love asking the failure questions because it stumps quite a lot of people. Because also sometimes I think when you feel like there's been a failure, you look back in 5 years, even 2 years, and you just think, wasn't actually that big a deal. Why was I stressing? So failures are all lessons.
I love that question.
Especially, having the incredible women that have come onto the podcast, hearing what they say, it's just so often that it's a lesson, it's a stepping stone, it's a redirection to all these beautiful and wonderful things.
And
so I love that.
Sorry, I'm cutting you off. All good. I would never demand perfection of you. You would never tell me to be perfect. So why the hell are we so strict on ourselves about it?
100%.
And I think as women, as girlies, we need to remind one another of that. It's like, it's okay and it's part of the journey and it's so normal, and that we would never ask each other to be perfect.
Yeah, I remember when we spoke, you said like, if someone was your best friend, you would never ask perfection from them. So why are we asking that of ourselves all the time? Societal conditioning. That's the only reason, I think. So comical moments. So what was a comical moment in your career that was embarrassing when it happened, but you laugh about it now?
I think it's the same.
I was going to say the AI thing.
It's about AI and tech, and it's just choosing to move into something that combines the two. So people are also not often thinking of working on digital policy or innovation, as well as looking at the human rights dimension of that. Nowadays more, but I noticed it wasn't so popular to bring those topics together. So that meant at some point in my career when I moved into working as a tech and equality advisor, more in the tech spaces, then I would come also as an outsider into being at these huge AI summits. And I had to kind of learn more about that world and understanding how these people perceive the impact of tech changing the world, essentially. I don't really like that expression, but the way tech is changing the way we live and connect and love and feel and believe in what is possible. So I had to sort of adjust and go through this like little metamorphosis without losing myself. So I think those are also sort of moments that when you are on that journey and you choose to pivot, you choose to recreate your life or the way that you're living your life. Again, you're going to make a fool of yourself at some point, but the best thing you can do is just laugh about it.
100%. And one of the questions now, I want to get into the conversation, the meaty bits, but one of the things I wanted to ask as well is that you obviously had this huge impact in Parliament, in the UN, you've spoken there before, and big advocate on human rights and GBV. You said it was kind of a natural progression to get into tech, but for other people, I mean, when they would just look at your profile, they would think, okay, well, you're a human rights activist and here's tech. Like, how did that come together? How did they equal one another? I think that's always kind of a burning question. It's a lot of things that people don't think about. Only until things like, Grok is undressing women and children, then people start thinking about safety. So what was that point? How did you realize, okay, now I'm sure you didn't feel like you accomplished everything maybe you wanted to do, but when you decided to pivot, why did you decide, okay, tech is where I need to pivot into?
So moving from grassroots level work and then getting into regional and national politics was an amazing opportunity for me. I was in Finland back in the days. Shout out Finland. And during that time, I worked as a gender equality expert inside a political party. So I was at the HQ of the party, working on both feminist policy, but also how to get more women into politics. So how do we get more diversity in the campaign pool already? How do we support women who are elected? How do we support them to go from local councilwomen to then politicians, ministers? How do we do that internal diversity work as well? Because democracy is kind of like the basis of democracy, to have representation, but also belonging inside political parties. So I would train hundreds of women and people of all genders, but specifically women, on how to run campaigns, how to be confident, how to understand different dimensions of policy as well, because often we might expect that women only want to talk about gender equality, but hey, there's many other things that they're interested of as well. But it was during that time when I started realizing I'm speaking to all these incredible women, and especially at the entry points because the barrier to enter was not that they didn't want to be active in politics or make a difference in the world, because they were scared of online violence. And we all know that nobody would want to apply for a job where they'd be exposed to violence every day. Like, that's not something anybody wants to do. So why would you, despite, knowing the benefits you can have in your city, on your children's life, all these amazing things that are possible through engagements in democratic institutions and systems. But everybody sees it online. We see how violent it gets, the kind of bullshit that women in politics have to endure because the world is still a patriarchal system, unfortunately, where women don't really have peace. So it was during that time where I said, okay, if we want to see changes in legislation, we want to see more equality and freedom and peace in societies and communities, globally even, we need more representation in politics. That's the bottom line. But if we can see that there's thresholds and boundaries that even prevent before even the idea of entering politics, we stop at that point. We need to address that. So that was kind of like the first moment where I said, okay, we need to look at the tech spaces as a barrier and what is the impact of those spaces on democratic participation and representation. So that's kind of where it started. Together then with international organizations, we started writing guidelines and instructions and toolkits for women on how to stay safe online while making political campaigns or while being an elected official, which then turned into an amazing opportunity where I worked with the OSCE on a global package where we would
help. What is the OSCE?
It's Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, but it basically covers also, basically overlaps, I think it's 50 plus countries with over 1 billion people. So they are member states around the world that commit to issues that have to do mostly with security, but then also they have a huge, amazing democracy unit, and they're very well known of election monitoring, for instance. So one of the projects they had was against violence against women in politics. And I was hired for this project to help them collect information around the world and create this toolkit, this package. That was the first one ever in history that would help both parliaments, political parties, and women themselves, and NGOs. I think there were 4 parts to that package on how to create change in a world where we're still dealing with this form of violence and harassment, whether it's sabotage in women's election campaigns or it's horrible violence inside these institutions, sexual harassment in parliaments, or if it's online, doxing or other kind of forms that are forcing women out of politics because of sexism, misogyny, but also power. People want to hold on to power, and women are often the ones who are challenging power.
Yeah.
So this is a long answer to tell you that was one of the reasons where I said, actually, I also want to understand more about what happens in tech spaces. Who can I speak to? Okay, we need to do this further out there with companies. We need to work with institutions and global alliances, because these are threats to all of us, no matter where we are. And then as part of that, also working with indigenous women, working with women with disabilities, working with young women, elderly women, like what are the barriers here and how can we take them down collectively, which then turned me into more of an advocate also looking at the larger space when it comes to digital policy, safety, inclusion, both inside organizations, but the impact it's having on society at large.
Yeah, wow, amazing. What a journey. And I mean, we mentioned earlier, so you've spent about over a decade in politics. So you were drafting laws in European Parliament, working with the UN, speaking at Davos. That's the kind of career that a lot of people want to hold on to for life. And you decided to walk away to pursue more executive coaching, being in the technical health and safety advocacy. But back in that career that you were in, what would you say is like one of the things that you were most proud of during that tenure?
Holding my friend's hand who was elected to Parliament, sitting in the plenary of the European Parliament, watching the first ever directive on gender-based violence being adopted.
Wow.
Seeing the Trans Act, so the legislation on transgender persons' rights in Finland, being updated, which meant that it removed a closure that required trans people to be forcibly sterilized if they wanted to correct their gender markers on their IDs, and seeing people who had undergone that torture, essentially, to get a moment of being seen and heard and loved by people and the system. So I would say it's those moments of joy in justice and really bringing that back and loudly existing in those moments. Seeing something like the adoption of the first ever gender-based violence directive in Europe, which is essentially telling 27 member states that they need to get their ish together. And they have to have specific minimum standards for prevention, access to safe houses, different consent-based, didn't go that far, but, definitions of rape based on consent, lack of consent. Seeing those minimal standards being set and these countries collectively saying we're going to do this, it's like 500 million people. So that's a really incredible thing. Also, as a woman who's survived gender-based violence, to be able to stand alongside and in the footsteps of the millions of women who will never get to see that happen. So it's a huge honor. So celebrating that and taking it in is part of the journey, and I will never let go of that. I came with balloons to the honestly, my colleagues were like, we didn't even know if security was going to let you in. And I literally rocked up to the European Parliament with these purple balloons. And I said, you know what? I'm here for the girlies. I'm here for all of us. And we deserve to have some fun. And maybe not every day.
Yeah.
But what?
Celebrate the wins. I mean, that's monumentous.
Absolutely.
Especially, I mean, we'll see what happens in South Africa. But I mean, for Europe, wow, that's incredible. And then also to have been present in the UN, it's like a dream of mine one day, to just be able to go and sit in the UN conferences and just listen like a fly on the wall.
And hopefully speak.
One day. We'll see. We'll see. Do you ever miss being in politics?
Yeah, absolutely. But I've also seen the impact, the lifestyle of working in politics and the impact it has on our well-being, lack of sleep. And now as a coach, I work with people in those spaces. So women who work in politics, people in diplomacy, impact-driven tech companies. And I see the impact that being committed and working towards greater purpose has on individual well-being. And obviously there are communities and collectives and the groups that they come from in society. So I love it. I don't think politics will ever leave me. I will always be very political, but as a way of making an impact, it's a feminist stance for me as well to say if this lifestyle and this way of working is draining me or is not what I want right now, the cause that I'm working on deserves someone better. So someone who wants to take my seats, I'll give it to them, and that's for me. I don't want to become resentful. I don't want to show up 80% of what I could give if I was feeling good, feeling fresh, feeling powerful. And if I feel like there's a transition in my life and in my energy, then come, let's give that spot to someone else, because everybody deserves to reach their dream. Everybody deserves the chance to come and make an impact. And holding on to power for me is not a feminist act. It's about sharing and it's about allowing opportunities and taking a step to the side.
I love that so much, because so many people, as you mentioned, will hold on to that power, or because maybe they've been in it for so long and they've earned their accolades for it and their scars. They just feel that they can't leave it now. It would feel like a failure if they had to step away. So it's really incredible to hear. And I mean, also the space that you're pursuing now is super interesting, right at the intersection of technology and human rights. As we mentioned earlier, it's sides that don't always talk to one another, or it's not always thought about until, like I mentioned, grok. But apart from the like grok example, just from what you've seen and experienced based on the conferences you've spoken on or where you've consulted, but just in plain terms, what does it actually look like when tech accelerates inequality, and where have you seen it personally go the most wrong?
Well, grok again.
It's the most common one that I think we all we've known because we've seen it. And I mean, there was also, it's not grok per se with undressing women and children, but also like the deepfakes, but motherless.com as well. I mean, that's tech, it's a website, all that stuff.
Absolutely. It's an arena. It's an arena that we're allowing to exist.
Within.
If we're not closing it down, we're allowing it to exist. Then what does that say about us and the world of the digital empires that we live in, The examples that you mentioned, I would say they're luckily becoming things that we can talk about at Sunday dinner now. And this is something that's not only behind closed doors or it's survivors trying to get justice. What we're seeing more and more is that people also talking about the manosphere, which I think is something very important to mention. Not only violence that's directly induced on women, say like deepfakes, or the misuse of smart homes, which is one of my favorite examples to mention because people don't think about it.
Yeah, when you mentioned it to me, right? Because I didn't think about it. And then it sat with me for a while afterwards, and I just was thinking there, wow, shit. Like what?
Yeah. So essentially what happens with smart homes is that these solutions are supposed to make our lives easier. You know, it's like, oh, cool. You can be driving home. You can press a button on your phone. You can activate your washing machine. Dope. You've got more time. You're free. You know, these solutions are making her lives easier, essentially. But what about for the woman who's locked into her house remotely by her partner, who is flickering the lights all night long, putting the TV on, boosting up the temperature, essentially torturing her through what's called smart technology? I don't think that's smart anymore. And then comes the question, okay, who is liable for this? Obviously, it's the perpetrator who does it, but what is the role of these products? And what is the role of the companies that are creating them if they're not, sorry, what is the role of these companies if they're not taking into account the impact that they can have on people's lives? And these are things that we don't think about. But whenever we have new tools, there will always be ways to misuse those tools, right? And here comes again, like the famous saying is like, it's not the tech itself that's bad, it's how we use it.
Yeah.
But then I'd like to challenge that a bit as well, because I think that we let people get away and not take accountability because we use that expression
all too often.
Right? And it's like, oh, it's not the gun, it's the person who shoots the gun. I'm like, if the gun wasn't in the room, you know, or if we didn't have actual...
It wasn't being sold at Walmart in America.
There would be a lot less shootings.
They would still happen, but it would be a lot less.
There you go. Like, are we making it accessible? Are we normalizing it? Are we letting it be out there for people to use without educational examples on what could go wrong, or just open dialogue about it? And just to come back to the manosphere, I mean, we are, to begin with, in a very difficult space when it comes to reaching gender equality at the moment. You've got horrible numbers saying that it'll take us over 100 years to reach any kind of... that it would take about, 100+ years for us to reach gender equality as it is. And now we've got these tools that can either accelerate progress or take us backwards. And what we're seeing is that boys, especially boys and young men, are just becoming algorithmic bait to these systems that are fueling hatred and anger. And benefiting of the loneliness of boys and men. And it absolutely breaks my heart. I was at an event in New York, and there's a lot of amazing organizations in a room talking about men's well-being, men's mental health, and the rights for men to also feel good and to not be lonely or isolated from communities because of gender roles. And I remember there was this person who was referring to a study saying that it was like 70% of boys that they surveyed said that they have no one in their life who they feel like knows them well. And that breaks my heart.
A lot of men, I noticed, they'll have big groups of friends, but no real best friends that they can sit down and say, look, I had a really, really bad day. Like, it was really tough. Like, can we just have a heart-to-heart? It's not a common thing for men. Whereas women will yappa to all our girlies. But I agree with you also on the manosphere, rather than them also trying to learn from why are women better emotionally regulated? Why do we also have lower suicide attempts? Lower risk to suicide as well. And rather than learning about the emotional regulation that women do and learning from that, it's being like pitted against. From what I see in the manosphere, it's like men don't talk about their feelings. That social conditioning, which I said in the beginning again.
Absolutely. There's also these really powerful books that have been written and amazing journalistic work that's been done on this by different institutions, research institutions, academics, authors even. And there's, you can find whatever kind of horrific numbers when it comes to, I think it was Laura Bates who said that it takes about 30 minutes when you create a new TikTok account. For a young boy, it takes an average like 28 minutes for misogyny content to be, targeted. And then there's the pipeline of, like how the algorithms on YouTube kind of take you, like just increase the violence that it shows you because you get more clicks. And that's also been researched. That's how these models work, as we know really well. But where I stand on this, like, we know we really fucking well know that this is a problem. It's not the information that we're lacking anymore. It's the inner change that needs to happen.
Yeah.
And I love what you said about that as well. Is like the deeper, profound conversations, communications, and actually being seen, being able to be vulnerable, which is like, I'm such a strong advocate for the inner work as well. And that's one of the reasons why I got into coaching as well, is that if we want to achieve some sort of social progress and social development, like the Sustainable Development Goals, really looking at the inner development that we also have to do and understand why we've been conditioned this way. Yes, but how are we taking action and how are we choosing our actions in these moments, and based on what are our beliefs, what are our values, how can we make little changes on a day-to-day basis to create more well-being for ourselves and show up for the world in a place of, I think, like, when we feel good, we want to do good in the world, right? And that's why the conversation around tech accelerating inequality or driving us apart, I think, needs to take a step backwards, and we need to start talking about the inner changes that need to happen. While in parallel, we do the policy work, we do the big work on the arenas, holding these platforms accountable 1000%. But we got to sit with ourselves and make tools and resources available for us to actually see what's going on here, and what do I want, and what do I believe in.
Yeah, just brings me back to that common saying is that hurt people,
right?
And you just see it so much. And whenever I watch, I haven't watched the manosphere, but seeing the clips that are coming from it, it's just like, you can see these men have been hurt, and they are hurting. And for them also, it's extremely selfish. But that is an entirely different podcast and a different conversation, which I know people can go down that rabbit hole. But I know, like with my fiance, I've sat with him a couple of times, and I've just said to him, like, you need to speak to your mates. I said, you can speak to me always, but that I can't be your only source of like comfort. So, and I said, you've got really good mates that I know if you had to go to them and say, look, I'm really down and I'm struggling with this right now, they will sit there and they will listen. And I was like, so you need to use that, leverage that. But he's like, oh, I don't want to burden anyone. So it's everyone's individual and different, but it's like those kinds of little stepping stones. He has slowly taken those steps where he has reached out to me to say, look, I'm struggling. And then he feels so much better for it. So just also, I think, seeing those little micro steps, and then we'll eventually get there. And it's like famous saying in South Africa, the Ubuntu, so, that we are all one, we are all together, and it has to start with you. And like you said, that inner work.